Welcome. It's wonderful to have such a great turnout for our first speaker series. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm Amanda Schuyler. I'm the president and CEO of the Preservation Foundation. And, this area is experiencing exceptional growth, this period that we're all living through right now. I think you see it on a day-to-day basis. And so we thought this would be a great topic to discuss to kick off the season. And so we're here this evening to understand the qualities that set the town of Palm Beach apart, and to discuss the important role of the Architectural Review Commission and Landmarks Preservation Commission in protecting the town character that contributes so immensely to the island's charm. I'm delighted to be joined with the current ARCOM chairman, Jeff Smith, Ted Cooney, who's a member of town council, and the current chairman of Landmarks, Sue Patterson. So please welcome our speakers. So we had a great Zoom call to prepare for this discussion, and Jeff actually shared a story that I want to invite him to retell for everyone here, because I think it really captures the significance of the work that ARCOM and the Landmarks Commission does here in the town.
It was about 25 years ago, and Preservation Foundation was doing a symposium for the University of Miami School of Architecture, because they wanted to see how students would redevelop Palm Beach. And I was speaking at that along with Bob Grace. And Bob got up and spoke and said, there's a lot of beautiful places in the world. And he named Monte Carlo, he named Capri, and he said, and Palm Beach is one of those, but the difference between Palm Beach and all those other beautiful spaces is we don't have any t-shirt shops. We don't have buses piling into town. This town is really for the residents. It's not for the shop owners. It's not for the shopkeepers. They're there to provide things for us, okay? And that really struck me, is that, I drive around and I think, he's absolutely right. I mean, we've been able to protect the town from those tacky things that seem to creep up everywhere else in the world.
So Bob Grace was such an influential figure in both local government and also in the formation and founding of the Preservation Foundation. And in many ways, he continued the town's legacy of a forward-thinking approach to development. Along those lines, Jeff, can you share with us the origin story of our modern-day Architectural Commission and its role today?
Well, the Architectural Commission was actually founded as the Art Jury, and it happened in 1928 after the 1928 hurricane really destroyed a lot of the properties in town. And the Art Jury was composed of, at the time, Addison Meisner. It was Meisner, Fazio. Those were the two major architects that were on the commission. And then joined later was Wyeth and Volk. And it was basically a critique, architects critiquing other architects to make sure that everything was respectful and blended into the town seamlessly. So we have them to thank for our commission today. And I think that ARCOM is doing a great job today. I have a very good commission. And sometimes it's tough that people don't like to hear no, but the reason why people buy in Palm Beach is because we're the most unique community in Florida that I know of. I mean, all we have to do is get in a car and drive south and see what went wrong. And we've been able to hold on to our history, our roots, our architecture, and I applaud the commission for their job, and I applaud the town council on how they select people to be appointed to the commission.
Fast forwarding to the 1970s, Ted, can you please share with us the development of the Landmarks Preservation Commission and how its work complements the work of the Architectural Commission?
Sure. Well, like in the 70s was a time of interest growing in historic preservation nationwide. A lot of it nationally was spearheaded by the demolition of Penn Station in New York City, which awakened people to the idea that things they valued in their communities could be destroyed, especially beautiful things. And Palm Beach followed suit with its own versions. This isn't the only one, but this was the Sanford's home, Los Incas, and that was demolished. And there was some consternation in the community that things people loved were going away. And this is also around the time Bob Grace was championing. I always like to describe it as he got the town to hit the brakes on development. You know, condos were soaring, and the town was kind of at a pivotal moment where it was at a crossroads where the character and charm was about to go. So they hit the brakes. They did a pause on construction and zoning, and they passed a brand new zoning code. The remnants of a heavily modified version are what we still have today. So we have to thank that era for the Palm Beach we all enjoy today. That was a really important moment. So the town passed a historic preservation ordinance with the help of some of the founders of the Preservation Foundation, which happened shortly thereafter. And it began designating some of the most iconic structures in town. I think the first 11 or so they put under consideration. All of them immediately went to court and sued the town. And the only one who didn't was John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who owned the home El Solano next door to where Sue lives today, which is always a fascinating tidbit.
Yeah.
Oh, and you asked me to talk about ARCOM and landmarks. What's interesting about our community is in many communities, historic preservation's an additional layer of bureaucracy that someone has to do with their private property. Instead of getting to do what you want, you have to go to a review board and get your plans approved. What's interesting in Palm Beach is we have design review for everything, and I think it's one of the main reasons we have such a beautiful community that we're all proud of. If you're building or doing exterior alterations, you're going to be reviewed by somebody. If you're not a historic structure, you're going to go see Jeff and his crew at ARCOM. And if you're a historic structure, you're going to go see Sue Patterson at Landmarks Preservation a week before.
See you.
Yeah. Only if they need exceptions from the zoning code. So they work in concert. You get design review from a different group that looks at things differently and has different sets of talents and things they look at. And that really contributes to the overall look and feel of the community, and I think is very essential to preserving the community's character.
Well, and I think that's a great segue to Sue as the current chairman of Landmarks. I'd love to hear from you. What is your favorite area of town, and what is it about that area that makes it so special?
Well, I think there's probably not an unfavored part of Palm Beach, but I've been lucky enough to live in the historical section here, the estate section, and so I'd say the L streets are probably my favorite. And if you've ever taken a stroll around there, you can see just the most beautiful and rare architecture in Palm Beach. The area was about 27 acres, which was originally purchased to be a private estate. But then the demand for smaller villas came about, and so it was divided into 36 lots. And the first villas were designed by Meisner and Wyeth, and in the style which my home is, Ted was talking about. I'm lucky enough to live in. That's how I got interested in landmarks in the first place, because I sort of rescued this 17-year abandoned home. The first floor was sand. There were no walls. There was no electricity, plumbing. You could stand in one corner and look all the way across it. And it was really such a terrific experience. So I'm going a little off our script, but it's in the Mediterranean revival style. And that was very vogue back in the 1920s. And so that's where these villas started. So that's really why it's probably my favorite part of town.
Ted, Jeff, is there anything you want to add to that?
I'd just like to add that I don't think any of these houses in this picture could be built today because of our zoning code. and the towers, the setbacks from the street and such. And these are nestled in so nicely. And to me, when a newcomer comes to town, I do like them to drive them around the L streets because I think they're so unique and they're so tightly fit together, but they all blend seamlessly together. So I know we're going to be doing code reform soon, and I think we need to use these streets as a guideline of what we can do. But I do like to have a lot of green space around properties, and I think that's what makes it unique is not overbuilding, but you can get close to lot lines and stuff without overbuilding. Make sure you have green garden space. I think Palm Beach is lush and should always be that way.
Just one more thing to add. If you can believe it, that 27 acres from lake to ocean was $175,000 in 1920.
Well, the only thing I'll add about this neighborhood is, you mentioned the first couple architects, but most of the major architects in town all built things in here, and it's really reflective of the variety of styles architectural styles we see in town. It started with, some of the 20s Mediterranean revival, but you see other forms. There's Monterey style homes, there's British colonial homes, and it's kind of reflective of the architectural diversity that makes this place unique and interesting.
Well, I think that's another great segue. Talking about areas of town that have a great diversity of architectural styles and represent many of the great architects that have worked here in town. Jeff, you have had an office in Phipps Plaza for decades, and it's actually always been the locale for many people who've worked in the design fields. Why do you think that is? What's the draw to that area?
Well, I think it's a unique little park setting. My office has been there for 32 years, and my office was John Volk's office prior to that. And Fazio had his office in here. I don't think Wyeth did. But it's... Across the street.
Yes, his was in the bank building, looking into Phipps Plaza.
Right. And it's just a unique little area. And right now it's under construction, a great deal of construction. And hopefully...
Most of the town is.
Yeah, right.
But hopefully we'll be able to restore the park and make it a beautiful spot once again.
Ted, you've been a champion of preservation and preserving so many important areas of town, and one of those is the C Streets. And I would love to hear from you and your view, what makes that area so unique and why is it worth protecting?
Yeah, I had a fairly unpopular proposal my last year on the Landmarks Preservation Commission to make a historic district in this neighborhood. But it is the genesis of that idea was what a unique area of town it was. It was developed in the platted and developed and subdivided in the teens by a developer. Developers tend to get a bad rap in town and sometimes meritoriously, but the town was developed by developers, and our earliest architects participated in speculative development projects, and good development can occur, and much of the town was done that. So this developer, it was Oscar Josie, wasn't it? And subdivided, and this street's unique, and I think one of the most beloved areas of town. You speak to the residents who live there, and they love their neighborhood, and they're fiercely protective of the neighborhood, both from encroachments of nearby commercial developments and also new residential development. It's really unique and characterized by its walkability, smaller lots, homes that are closer together. It was really kind of a cottage district for not the wealthiest in town. It originally, was home to teachers and policemen and was a more modest thing. And it's been so many families grow up in this neighborhood. It has a great variety of architectural styles. And most of our lots in town are a bit more suburban, about 100 feet or so wide on average, give or take. This is a cozier neighborhood and really has a unique look and feel. And it's having some challenges as homes sell and there's some redevelopment. There's a a proposed home was recently denied. You may have read about in the paper, infill that both the many neighbors and the Architectural Review Commission didn't feel was in keeping with the character. So, you know, we have many tools in this town to protect our neighborhoods. You know, this neighborhood, it had all these elements. It had proximity to a school. There used to be these beach clubs up at the ocean.
The headmaster's house was there for the Palm Beach Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a shame they sold that.
Yeah, right.
But it's really a unique part of town, and the folks who live there really enjoy it. They have the best of both worlds. Live in a single family home, but can walk to dinner and walk to cultural institutions in town, to the rec center. It's just really a unique part of town.
Well, my next question is for everyone. You've all served on boards, and I'd love to hear, you know, what are some of the projects that you look back on with the greatest sense of pride, and what did the property owners and the design team working on them get right?
Everything.
Well, I'll start with Duck's Nest, which is the second oldest home in the town of Palm Beach. And had been in the same family's ownership since its construction until very recently. And for a long time, it was a rental home. Or at least in my lifetime and memory, you can talk to a lot of families in town who either are shopping for a new home, or while they were renovating their home, you can talk to a ton of people who at one point lived in Duck's Nest for a season or two, until they found their digs or finished working on their property. But the home was nearly lost, at least in its current form, recently. The owner had proposed. It was an old wood home, and wood in Florida can be challenging, and it had some major structural issues that needed to be addressed. And the solution that they thought at the time was best would be to demolish it and rebuild a modern version, but that looked just like it, but was bigger and accommodated, you know, an open floor plan and a lot of the things. But it would have been a concrete home, and it would have been an imitation. And that was not well received by the community and by the historic board. And what's great about this community is we have so many people who care and invest in things. So a neighbor to the property who had themselves restored an old wood home in Nantucket, so came with some vested experience, stepped in, acquired the property. They had built the home you see in the foreground at the bottom. This cul-de-sac was subdivided from the Maddox property into a number of developable lots. And so they built and constructed the home you see in the foreground. It went through ARCOM, has a shingle roof. And then that opportunity, I don't think they'd planned on acquiring Duck's Nest, but the opportunity presented itself. And they stepped in and were really the saviors of Duck's Nest. This is Brian and Julie Simmons, who deserve a world of credit for their great work. They've deservedly won the Ballinger Award from the Preservation Foundation for their restoration of this home. And they took it apart piece by piece, and when they had to introduce new materials, I mean, they kept what they could that was old and really did it all so sensitively. And they joined it into this fabulous compound. So they united their original home, where they still live today. And the home on the lake serves as an entertainment space and guest house. And they've created a pretty magical compound that really works well in the neighborhood and save that house. And that was one of the great preservation stories of recent history.
And Sue, you shared a more recent victory.
Well, I think Ted and I can both agree, and all of us up here, that somebody who's willing to come forward with their home and agree to landmark it, that to us is number one. I mean, that's a dream. And we really feel like we need to change the narrative in Palm Beach, that the landmark sort of has a sour label, but it's really such a great thing, and there are so many benefits to it. And I feel like our commission is very forgiving and working with the homeowner. And having done it myself, I really thought it was a terrific experience. So I can say that from my own time. But this house was brought up to us recently, and it is, yes, very recently. And Ted, you can add on to this, but the woman was originally against, please pronounce her name for me. Who dare?
If I can jump in.
Yeah, sure, please.
The home's owned by a lovely woman who's owned the home with her late husband, and it was the original home we're looking at is a Meisner home, and the home had subsequent additions by Maurice Fascio, and then a tea house and courtyard addition by Howard Major. So when you get three of the greats together on one project, it's usually a pretty good thing. And her late husband had objected to the landmarks designation, and only a fragment of a door, kind of gate thing facing the street, was designated. And the issue was just revisited recently, and we hope that nothing's finalized yet, but she's agreed to study and have the whole property potentially designated as a landmark, which is a great win of educating and working with our property owners about the process, what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Right.
Sometimes you find that in this case, someone has concerns that someone's going to fuss that they won't be able to redo their kitchen. Well, as those of us close to it know, well, of course you can redo your kitchen. These homes aren't museums meant to be frozen in time. They need to evolve and continue to serve their function as a home for our modern needs. And there's a way to preserve old structures and give them new life so they last another generation or more.
We don't live like people don't live like they did in the 20s and 30s. And so I just wanted to say that a couple of other examples, Kit Panel being one, and her neighbor, Lita Austin Foster, and Mrs. Ailes also. Real leaders in the community who have brought forth their homes and to be landmarked. And I just think that is, I hope more follow their lead.
And those things
very
happen
special
through education and outreach. Sue and the members of her board have been doing that on their own throughout the community. We're fortunate to have organizations like the Preservation Foundation that advocate, but also educate.
So you can spread the word. Help us out. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have to add, Duck's Nest and both Lita Austin Foster's house and Kit Panels is something we take particular pride in because we were very involved. Duck's Nest, obviously, that was played out over a period of time, and the Preservation Foundation was right there advocating for that building to be saved. We actually underwrote a structural engineering report that was very helpful information for the commission. And as Kit Panel is a trustee of ours, and her conversations with us led to the property being voluntarily designated, and then that inspired Lita Austin Foster, her next door neighbor, to do it. So it's amazing the way we're able to work together, I think, and the way that the foundation supports the town and the Landmarks Commission in particular.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, the best successes we have in this community are all team efforts when we get together and work together amongst, government, private sector, and not-for-profits. And
I will say that I forget what year it was, but in the 90s, I was chairman of the Landmark Commission, and I offered my house up, and I knew I wanted to do a major addition to the house ahead of time. But I offered it up so I could show the community you can do major additions to a house and still get landmark approval. So it's not a curse that you are stuck with something frozen in time.
So we briefly touched on it when we were talking about Duck's Nest and the Simmons new home. But Ted, I wanted to ask you, how do you redevelop with a sense of history? How do we encourage infill construction that really complements the architectural heritage of the town?
Well, that's a big issue facing the community right now with the real estate surge post-COVID. We know we're one of the hottest communities on the planet, and I think we're at record permit volume out of the building department. I don't think you need to know that stat. I think you just feel it in your streets and your neighborhoods and driving around or getting caught with all the construction trucks either in the morning or evening. But the community's going through some growing pains. As older homes maybe have outlived some older, not everything's worth preserving. I think that's an important thing to say. Some older homes have outlived their life and don't suit the modern needs of the owner or family. And there's going to be infill redevelopment. And the Architectural Review Commission has standards and criteria that are meant to be met, but they're really meant that the infill development the goal of the community is that it fits the context of the street it's on, the neighborhood it's on. So when we were preparing for this, I surprised Jeff and pulled out one of his commissions he did probably over 20 years ago that's always stuck out to me as a great example. This is a home on Kenlin Road at the north end that Jeff designed. And Jeff's done amazing, fabulous work, including this beautiful building we're sitting in today, all over town, and we're blessed to have him doing work in town. But this has always stuck out to me as a good example of infill development that fits the context of a neighborhood. References are one of the styles that fits so well and nicely into our diverse architectural heritage. And, was built 20 years ago, but, if you could probably convince someone it was built in the 1930s. So there's opportunities to do infill development and do it properly. But Jeff designed it, so he should probably.
I really don't have much to say about it, except it is a nod to the past. I had a great client, Mr. and Mrs. Hugh Davis. He was the contractor, and we didn't overdevelop the lot. That's the key is letting there be some space to develop your garden and your pool area, so it gives a sense of relief. Otherwise, they just become McMansions, and so. I always say pigs get slaughtered, and that's what happens at ARCOM when you try to do too much.
Yeah, and it's one of the issues the town, you may have read, is looking back at our zoning code. I referenced, we have the remnants of that code, Bob Grace, and thank God he got it in, but it's been tweaked and nipped and tucked like some of our residents over the years. But it's oh gosh. Hey, nothing against plastic. It's now in a form where it may not be serving our needs. So in town hall, we're endeavoring to look back at our zoning code and make sure that it's serving us properly. And we're endeavoring to look at a rewrite, which we've hired consultants for, and all of you in the entire community this winter will be invited to participate in the process, which will be gotta give a plug for our process here. Collaborative process. We want to hear from residents about how to make things better. And we also, sometimes some of the homes that we're getting that aren't fitting in nicely to neighborhoods are perfectly legal under our code. And some of the homes we love from the past would be illegal to build. And that seems out of sorts to a lot of us who are close to this stuff. So we want to write a process that allows for new, but allows that the new can fit in nicely. Jeff referenced some of those homes on the L streets. Most of the homes on the C streets could not be built under our code. And when we care and have institutions and celebrate our past so much, you have to scratch your head when you wonder that some of the great things we couldn't legally build today, and it's legal to build some of the things that we don't want. So we hope everyone who's interested, and you've all come tonight, and thank you for that. We hope you'll all participate in that process, and we look forward to a healthy dialogue about the future of the town.
The one thing I want to say about our zoning code is that it's evolved over the last 50 years, and during that time period, you wonder, why is this in the code? And oh yes, now I remember, it was this house on this certain street that did this, so we had to rewrite the code. And that's what happens to the code. It gets abused so much that it no longer serves its purpose. So it's time.
So I wanted to circle back to a comment that I made at the beginning about the town's forward-thinking approach to development, and use this as an opportunity to promote the benefits of the historically significant building program, which is relatively new, but it's really doing a creative way of preserving town character. And so it's under the purview of landmarks. So I wanted to ask you, Sue, if you could share a little bit about that, and we'll jump in too.
Yeah, please do. It's this process is about 2 years old, and it's mostly to preserve, less. Although we do landmark houses that are on route trail, but it's mostly for smaller homes, and it's a program where the owner brings forth their home, and if it meets the criteria, then we're able to award it this historically significant building. There are about 30 properties that are currently have this designation.
And I'll admit, when this was first proposed, I was a little hesitant about it because it seemed like a lighter version of the Landmarks program.
Landmarks Light, yeah.
Right. I and many others have come around to it. What we found was happening in town was we were trying to minimize some of the demolitions we had. And under our code, if you are substantially remodeling a home and you exceed 50% of the value of the structure, you need to bring everything up to code, including setbacks, which most homes don't comply with, finished floor elevation, which many older homes don't comply with, and a lot of other factors. And when you look at when you actually dig into it, some of these homes may be assessed at a structure value of something like $50,000, and the lot's worth $7 million, I must say.
Yeah.
So that really doesn't leave you with very much funds if 50% of that to improve your home. So a lot of folks who wanted to keep an older home would start digging into the process and find out they just needed to scrap it and build something new. So this process allows for someone to keep their home, exceed that threshold, and participate in a process. They're reviewed at the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And already it's been such a great success. As Sue referenced, there's been over 30 homes that have gone through this process that potentially otherwise would have been even more demolitions in our community.
And we really only have 300 and some for how many years? Over 40, about 40 years. So we've
just over 350.
Right. So we've accumulated these quickly.
So let someone make substantial improvements to a small house, make it work for them, and not force them to scrape the lot and build something new.
And that is still a possibility if they do sell it and somebody else comes along.
This program doesn't protect the home like a landmark from demolition. It's a voluntary program. It's administered administratively. A consultant determines if it's eligible, and then it goes through a review process. It's been a great process, and there's a lot of folks. Preservation advocated for it. Our former director of the building department, Josh Martin, championed this program, and it's been a great success, and I think is keeping some of the scale and context in our neighborhoods for property owners who want to do work, which is great. We want old homes improved for all of our property values and beautiful neighborhoods. And if we can minimize demolitions along the way, that's a good thing as well.
It's a great thing.
Well, I guess I wanted to finish up by asking, we did touch on code reform, but what are some of the other challenges ahead for the town, and how is the town being responsive to those issues?
Well, yeah, I must have jumped ahead on code reform. Sorry, I get passionate sometimes. We've alluded to a lot of the issues happening in the community just with development, and we're going to be going through some of those issues of size and height. One of the most challenging issues that we're confronting is we're on a barrier island and a lot of homes are low, and the new FEMA flood elevations, and as we confront sea level rise, mean homes and their finished floors are higher. That's one of the hardest because a lot of our older homes are lower. And you're not only required to, but many people want to build above and ensure their home's protected from floodwaters. That's a reasonable thing to desire. But it does present challenges in our neighborhood. You can go a block away from here on the other side of Pan's Garden and see a home side by side, old to new, and they're very different heights. The lots sometimes get filled and leave the adjacent neighbor in what they feel and is sometimes a bathtub of drainage and runoff, even though the town has pretty stringent requirements for stormwater retention. We live in a subtropical climate and we get storms and heavy rains, and that's one of the challenges we're facing. Jeff's gonna pass.
You're doing so.
No? Okay. This was an interesting photo that I wanted to throw in there. This is from the palm sale, which the Preservation Foundation did, I think, for over a decade in response to the lethal yellowing that took out so many of the palm trees in the 90s. And so those are, I think, just an example of, how the community responds to whatever challenges arise. And I have great hope that the leaders here in town will continue to guide the town in the way that it has always. We are so fortunate to have the design review boards that we have, and especially to have the three of you and so many other people who are here today who volunteer to serve on our boards and lend their expertise. So thank you all.
And thank you very much for all you and Amy Sunny, wherever she is. She's our 8th commissioner. Thank you so much for all of your help that you do for us.
Thank you.